Let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this great stormwater day. How apropos to have a nice rainy day to be inside and talk about stormwater a little bit. I'm Dave Reuter with Franklin Soil and Water. This is our annual MPDS training for municipal staff or interested folks as well. So I hope you're tuning into our trainings and getting something out of this. Few housekeeping items. So we do have poll questions in here. We ask that you participate in that. Those are our way of tracking those contact hours and just seeing that you're there and awake and observing. So do participate in those if you would, please. Like I say, that's how we're kind of tracking that participation aspect with these and getting you those contact hours. This is being recorded. Brooke, you did start the recording?
Yes, okay. I did.
Good. So we'll have these available for you to review. We won't be able to offer you contact hours because of the poll questioning and that. So like I said, be sure to participate in those poll questions. If you're meeting in a larger group, maybe, and you're looking for contact hours, be sure you do like a sign-in sheet or something, and you can send that to us, scan it, send it to us, and we'll be sure you get those certificates of contact hours for this. With that, I guess I'll forge on and have the first poll question. So, do you plan to participate in more of our MCM webinars? So I'm kind of curious, how many participants we'll have coming back on this. We are going to cover some of the same stuff we cover every time. So I am trying to limit the amount of information I go over and over again in each one of these. But we do have some new people. We do have first timers coming into this. So, I want to put a context on the MPDS programs and how each one of these MCM fits. So we will be seeing some of the same information that was presented last time, and in the future, I'll be having some of those introductory slides as well. So bear with me for those that have been here, and hopefully those that are new will get something out of this beginning intro. Looks like we've got about 100% participation. Awesome. Thank you all. Let's go on. Let's see. Let me share the results. Is that what I need to do? Or close that poll question? So, as I mentioned the last time, and if you haven't seen, this is kind of where MPDS started. Really, 69, the famous burning river of Cuyahoga was featured in Time magazine. Curious to me, the river's caught fire 13 times before, and the 69 event, there's not even a picture of it. This is the 52 event that was featured in Time magazine, because the 69 event was pretty much taken care of very quickly. But it was at a time, there was a big environmental movement at that time. And it just goes to show you that, when there's a groundswell for things like this, and especially water quality, this is a basic human right. This is not a bipartisan political thing. We all deserve clean water. Environmentally, it's something that we shouldn't be allowed to pollute our waters. And I think everybody can really get behind that and get on board with that. This was something that happened locally in Ohio, and I think it really did help with that environmental movement in Ohio. And I think we're seeing something like that now with, climate change. Whether you're a denier or not, there's things that are happening that are affecting our world and our basic environmental rights. So water quality is what we're talking about here. It's a big issue. It's something we need to focus on and really do something about. And that's where the MPDS program has really, come about because of this basic need for this. Let's see, I'm a little off of here's a little bit of information. Like I said, it was one of the most covered incidents occurring on the river, but like I say, there is no pictures of the 69 event. This was all from the 52 event, which is kind of interesting to me. So a little bit of history, MPDS history. What are the laws that regulate that? What we know is the Clean Water Act from 1972 is actually amendments to the Federal Water Pollution Control Act of 1948. We've been doing water quality type controls ever since the turn of the century. You had the Rivers and Harbors Act. I think that was 1898 that came out. And the outgrowth of the federal need to control our federal waters and how we treat them. So when we see the Clean Water Act come out in 72, those amendments really established the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. Further on, we see the 87 amendments that came in. This was really when the states got that control and that phased aspect of approaches to water quality. You see the 90 phase 1 rules you'll hear reference to. That was for the large municipalities that had publicly owned treatment works, industries, large construction projects. That's the phase 1 rules, and those were really applied to those larger communities. 1999 phase 2 rules was for the small MS4s, and that's really what we're concerned with here is looking at those phase 2 rules and the new permit that's coming out here shortly. Locally, in Ohio, you could say ORC 6111 was in 92. That's really when the state came down with their rules and regulations. OAC for water quality was in 98. So, and if you look, OAC, the 3745-39 is the small MS4 rules, and that was effective since June of 2004. So, in essence, the small MS4 rules are really since 2004, and my old head, 2004 is not that long ago. We haven't been doing this very long, so there is a lot of catching up to do, a lot of things to follow up on, and this hopefully is part of that effort to educate everybody on where we're at with MPDS and how we address some of these things. We use a lot of acronyms. I apologize. You got MPDS, we got MS4, and I do like to define some of that. Let's take a look at what, when we talk about MS4, all of the MPDS rules apply to your MS4, which is your municipal separate storm sewer system. M with the 4 S's. That's what we're talking about when we say MS4. And defining your MS4, what is your MS4? Let's, take a look really here at what we're looking at. So if you have, particularly in this case, when we're talking IDDE, IDDE is the illicit discharge detection and elimination program. It deals a lot with your infrastructure and what discharges to your infrastructure. So what is your infrastructure? Well, when we're looking at some of the minimum control measures, like I mentioned last week, your MS4 on public participation is really your municipal boundaries. We're trying to reach your residents. And a lot of those performance mechanisms in public participation and outreach is based on your population. So when we're talking that minimum control measure, your MS4 might include your entire boundary of your municipal area. When we're looking at IDDE, this becomes important in defining where your MS4 is. So here we've got a situation where, we're looking at a house, maybe they've got a home sewage treatment system that's discharging to the creek. Is that your MS4? Not necessarily. Those are state waters. So you may not have a discharging system to your MS4. It may be in your municipal boundary, but it's not going to be one that's looked at in the sense of being discharging to your MS4. Let's take a look at some of these situations here. So here we have areas, that are discharging to maybe stormwater ponds, discharging to catch basins, or you have a stormwater pond. This may be a private pond that's discharging to a catch basin. If that catch basin is something that you have control over, you maintain it, these are systems that are actually discharging to your system. And something that you need to be looking at in your IDDE program is how do you control, how do you enforce, how do you maintain that in a way that limits the discharges and your exposure as an MS4 to problems that may be facilitated by that structure. So this is really about asset management, defining your assets, what do you take care of in your municipality, and how do you take care of those and address problems. I did want to mention, it gets a little, not when you look at this situation. So you may have a roadside ditch. It's not always clear cut what that is. So if you've got HSTS that discharge, you may have a discharging system to a agricultural ditch or just a drainage way, basically, that makes it into the roadside ditch. It doesn't become as clear when we're talking about maybe a right-of-way, a roadside ditch that you have discharging to the system, or perhaps you have this situation where you have a household that's discharging to the right-of-way system. You may be responsible for those kinds of discharges to that roadside ditch. So it's not always a clear-cut situation. But think about your asset management and what you have for assets and how you take care of those. So let's look at the MPDS permit. And right now, I'll just say I'm going to rely heavily on the new permit that's out. There's a red line draft version that I think Brooks attached to the in the presentation. You should have available, but I've done screenshots of a lot of the redlining, and we'll talk to that, what those coming changes are about and how that might affect you relative to what we've been doing in the past. And like I say, the MPDS permit, was the new draft is out, and there are changes, and we're trying to just address. This is my chance to kind of go through our old training. We've been doing this for quite a few years, pretty much in the same old way, at least for the past 5 years. And so with some of the new changes, I hope to kind of reflect what the training is and what we might be seeing in the future with these trainings. So the MPDS permit, like I say, this is federally mandated. These were the broad controls. The Clean Water Act kind of gave over that ability to the states to manage those controls. But the scope of it is those 6 minimum control measures with the MPDS permit: public education, public involvement, illicit discharge detection, elimination, construction site runoff control, and post-construction site runoff, and good housekeeping. So the remaining series will, next week we'll focus on the construction and post-construction aspects, and then that following webinar will be on the good housekeeping, pollution prevention aspect of it, MCM. That'll be November 12th, I believe, for the good housekeeping. And like I said, the construction, post-construction will cover next week. This This week, we're focusing on the IDDE, the illicit discharge detection elimination. Enough with that. Let's jump into permit aspects. Like I said, here's the front page of the old permit, number 3. We're in the 3rd generation right now. You can see that expiration date, September 10th, 2019. It's 2020. We're looking for the new permit. It's out. We've got it. It's coming up here shortly. Let me get my slide advancing. So I'm not seeing slide advance. What's the problem here? Here we go. New permits out. Red line version is up. We have that available. And so again, this is a red line draft version. These things aren't happening yet. We're just responding to what may be. But for the most part, I think most of this will not change in the coming permit. Other thing I wanted to point out, 44 pages on this one. The last one was 24 pages. So it just maybe illustrates the fact that there are quite a few changes, and these webinars, doing these by MCM, perhaps it'll help us do a little bit deeper dive in what some of those changes are and talk a little bit more to those. I will say the vast majority of those 44 pages were the inclusions of the appendix for the TMDL list. I do encourage you to look through that. It's listed by county. See what you have for TMDLs listed, and look at your programs and see that you're addressing those accordingly. So that's what a lot of this is coming from. And this is from EPA's outreach information. So what types of changes occurring in draft? A lot of clarifications, just some minor edits here and there. They're making those minimum control measures clear and specific and measurable. So a lot of the performance standards have been updated and are getting a little more specified in what you need to be doing. Like I say, the TMDL plan is mentioned in there, and focused heavily on what those impairments are and how you're going to address those. And then addressing commonly found compliance problems. That was the other thing that they've added into their some of the issues, and one of those comes up here in the IDDE that we'll actually talk to a little bit further down the road. So the IDDE program, if we look at that, what's it mean? Develop and enforce a program to detect and eliminate illicit discharges and non-stormwater discharges into your MS4. Again, it's looking at what your assets are and what do you have discharging to them. Develop a stormwater system map. Mapping for this is very important. So here's your catch basins, your pipes and ditches, flood control facilities, water quality BMPs, and post-construction. That's something that is being more and more featured and more part of the performance standards is those post-construction devices. All on-site HSTS systems, and then having the ordinance in there and having a way to inform the public, as well as having a way for the public to inform you of illicit discharges. So that's part of this program that needs to be developed for this MCM. And I will say, here's the ubiquitous cell phone. Everybody's got one. I'm looking at 2 of them sitting here on my desk. This is something that I mentioned last time in the public involvement and public participation. Having these phone apps is really something that I think it's not going away. We're going to see more and more of it. So looking at that crowdsourcing information, IDDE really lends itself well to this. This is something that you can snap a picture. This is my Dublin Go app that I've got on my phone, and it provides you an instant link to a service request or a problem. If you don't have a website, or don't have any kind of data sources, I think you should really start looking into it and have some kind of program like this. This is a very easily used, it's a lot better than you get into some of these phone trees and trying to find where to go or what you're even looking for can be really difficult, where something like this is a very straightforward, very easily, very pervasive. Like I say, everybody's got a cell phone. I should have done a poll on how many people have a cell phone right now, and I'm sure we'd get 100% on that. So take advantage of that, and it's just something I wanted to point out. A lot of these MCMs, they have various bits and pieces that go with other MCMs. So we're really looking at integrated programs and how to go about that. So IDDE, more of the old recommendations. This is part of what's in there, is identifying those HSTS that can be connected to central sewers. You should be looking at progress in your IDDE program. How are you going to get some of these HSTS, discharging HSTSs, and perhaps looking at how to get them hooked up to central sewers. That's really the goal of this. So looking at operation and maintenance, a lot of municipalities rely on the boards of health to have a MOU with them on maintenance of these systems. Our Franklin County Public Health monitors and inspects most HSTSs on a yearly basis, see if they're operating, and that's where a lot of that lies with them. Identifying sources of contamination and outfalls, in high pollution areas of concern. That's something originally, first generations of the permit, the mapping was there, and a lot of these outfalls were mapped as just outfall reconnaissance. And we have a lot of that information on outfalls and the discharge, and those are, dry weather screened and looked at for illicit discharges on a yearly or annual or a permit basis. So here's something, this is directly out of the red line version, and just some of the qualifiers that are getting put in there, some of the changes that are happening. Here was a quick clarification. Interconnected, so looking for illicit discharges to your MS4 via an adjacent, outside, or interconnected MS4, required to immediately inform the neighboring MS4. This is kind of come out of some of these connections rise to the level of maybe being reported a little bit sooner than later. I know a lot of these get put into the annual reports as just, yeah, here's this incident that we noted in our dry weather screening, and we'll be taking care of it. Well, if that's going into an adjacent MS4, you should be notifying those adjacent MS4s immediately of that situation. I think that's where we've seen a lot of great collaboration with our MS4s and that interconnectedness. We have a lot of that going on, but some of that, you really need to be ensuring that your partners and your adjacent communities are getting notified of that. 3B there, you can see the addition of post-construction BMPs. So again, this is where I've noted, at least in a lot of our data that we've collected, we have the outfall information, but we haven't necessarily identified what that outfall is from. So you have post-construction BMPs shall be identified by type of practice. Examples are wet extended detention, bioretention, etc. So I want to note that depending on who you're sending out there, are they trained for that ability to recognize what kind of BMP that post-construction is? This is something that I've noted with a lot of our data collection, and even some of the data collection I've seen around the county. You know, generally speaking, this becomes maybe an intern, summer intern practice to go out and map some of this. They may not be familiar with all of the post-construction BMPs that are out there. You know, I point to maybe a vortex chamber in the ground or an underground infiltration area. Those may not even be apparent to somebody, and you may not map those correctly. So looking at going forward, the post-construction requirements in your program in the MCMs we'll talk about next week, you know, you should be having that review of these projects that are coming on and getting that mapping in forefront with anything that has post-construction. So there's a mapping aspect that applies to these other practices well before we're getting into that. Well, you should have a map of this. Anything that's coming online, you should be getting those mapped beforehand and into your program. So that brings us to a poll question. Do you feel like your programs meet current standards? We'll give you about a minute there, or we'll see if we get 100% participation here, we can move on. It looks like we are, a few maybe changing their mind, maybe thinking about that a little bit. So I think looks like we're up to 100% there. So for the most part, everybody feels comfortable with their program. It looks like a few, you know, maybe not. So let's delve a little more. We're going to go ahead and end that polling. And thank you very much again. Get this off of my screen. So some of the requirements, some of the changes, some of the clarifications. Here's another one I just wanted to point out real quick. This is about non-stormwater discharges, flows. There are a lot of these that are kind of grandfathered in, you know, and you need to look at them: pumped groundwater, discharges from potable water, you know, pool discharges. The reason I note there, they have included desalinated swimming pool discharges. And something I wanted to note, that with a lot of these new pools are saltwater pools. They cannot be discharged to the storm. They need to go to sanitary. There's no way of desalinating your pool, basically. It has to be discharged to the sanitary, or you can discharge it to your yard and make sure it doesn't get off. I'm just warning you, though, that, you know, the salinity of those pools is about what you know, Visine is. So it will build up. It can affect your lawn, but it cannot be discharged offsite or into the storm. So something to be aware of locally. I know a lot of local regulations take a look at that pool discharge, and some of them don't allow that to be discharged to the curb, to the storm. But take a look at your regulations and make sure that desalination aspect is notified. You take a look at that. So this is performance standards in IDDE. Some of the updates to that are dry weather screening. They're looking at doing 100% of your stormwater outfalls annually, looks like annually is, yeah, 100 annual, or no, they've got that crossed out. I'm sorry, I'm looking at that difference. So 100% or 1,000, whichever, during the permit term, whichever you have more of. So if you do have a lot of outfalls, some of our communities have a lot of outfalls, you're going to be looking at, 1,000 of those over the permit term, or you're looking at 100% of those over that 5-year permit term. Keep in mind that permit term comes about when you apply for coverage under your new permit, which according to EPA, will be coming out shortly. That will kick that in. Here's one of the changes I wanted to talk about directly, requiring proper salt storage at commercial, institutional, and non-NPDS permitted industrial facilities. At a minimum, your ordinance or other regulatory mechanism shall require the following: designated salt storage areas shall be covered or indoors. Designated salt storage areas shall be located on impervious surface, and the implementation of practices such as sweeping up or diversions. So this is something that came about because of compliance issues they've had. I know of 2 instances. One was here in Franklin County, another was an ODOT facility. And the salt piles contaminated groundwater and nearby wells and aquifers. This would be very hard for municipalities to enforce, I'm afraid, particularly as it relates to groundwater and policing of these. We're talking about perhaps fugitive salt piles that occur, this time of year. They're stocking up for winter. Perhaps it's a landscaping firm that has contracts to do snow removal. That's typically what we would see. And those salt piles would, come and go with the season, be on private property, and potentially not discharging anywhere except to the groundwater. So this, again, is something new in the draft. This wasn't vetted by any of the early stakeholder outreach. It just appeared in the new draft, and I'm not sure if this will make it into the actual permit. This is something that is in there, and we did make some comments regarding this aspect and how this might be difficult to enforce. But if you have these kind of facilities in your municipality, you might need to be taking a look at your ordinances and how you might cover some of these performance standards that are listed in here. Another thing, here's: you shall notify EPA of following listed discharges are detected discharging to your small MS4. This again is something where they are looking at if you have certain discharges that rise to a certain level of problem, like the illicit sanitary cross connections from industrial, commercial, or multifamily sources, leaking or broken sanitary sewer lines that are actively contributing sewage to your small MS4. These are situations they're looking at as being, pretty major, and they want to be notified within 24 hours of discovery of these. So be aware of that. Should any of these situations arise in your community, taking a look at that and really reporting that quickly is paramount. And really, I've told municipalities, anytime you do have even a small spill of some kind, it doesn't hurt to report these to EPA. Anytime you get a small spill and you think, oh yeah, our crews cleaned it up. Well, if that were oil and it happened to get to surface water and you see that sheen on the water, or that gets reported as sheen on the water and you didn't report that, that's an automatic, because of that non-report, it's an automatic fine for your municipalities. So it's worth noting that. It's worth collaborating with EPA on this or with us, you know, and sharing that information. It's just not worth the hassle. And we're all in this together, like I say, for water quality. That's my soapbox minute. I'll move on. MS4 draft changes regarding TMDLs. This permit includes performance standards or choices of performance standards that must be included in the swamp as response to applicable TMDL in the MS4's watershed. This is what I mentioned before. This is kind of where, you know, we get the additional pages to the new draft regarding TMDLs. Here's the added text for the TMDL performance standard. So if you have any of these following pollutants identified in your MS4, and this again comes from this Appendix A that you'll see, added quite a few pages to the permit to go through, but look for your county, look for your watersheds, see what's in there, and focus on, you know, when you have nutrients, E. coli, bacteria, DO or organic enrichment. If you have any of those and your illicit discharge program includes the following performance standards, include an annual employee training, which includes illicit discharge detection and elimination topics. So this is part of what we're doing now. And perhaps next year, we're going to look a little bit more at what does the performance standard mean as far as nutrients or to E. coli? You know, what can we do in our stormwater management plan that's going to address those specific nutrients and specifically to areas and watersheds. You know, for Franklin County, we cover the entire county. We have, I believe there's 4 TMDLs or 3 or 4 TMDLs listed. We have basically 3 different permit levels to look at with the Olentangy and the Big Darby and the general permit. And we have communities that are divided by TMDLs. So there's a lot of mix and matching going on there. We need to cover all our bases, and we will probably do a little more focused outreach on what those TMDL performance standards mean and how we can address those specifically. Include water quality testing, field and or laboratory of all observed dry weather flows unless source is known. Prioritize the area. Josh, I'm going to throw one to you. So what always confused me about this was unless the source is known. And I know when we find dry weather flows and look at those, what the sources is, you know, we'll track back that source and see if we can find it. Now, if that extends off of our MS4, basically, you know, are we to grab a sample from that and have that tested, or does the field observations count as enough testing, basically, to prioritize those areas of concerns? I'll go ahead and let you.
Well, Dave, my current thinking and understanding on that is if it's crossing a boundary and say Dublin is discharging into Hilliard and Hilliard picks it up, at that point their responsibility is to let Dublin know. As you said, most of the time when we're out dry weather screening, we're able to trace down where that pollutant is coming from. Vast majority of the time, there's only been a few times, or not very many times, where we haven't been able to determine it. In those instances, I think is where EPA is really trying to get some more information. Now, the little caveat to that is that in some of those instances where we can't actually find a true source, a lot of times there's infiltration in the storm system. So the only way to actually verify that is to get a camera out there and start going through the system and seeing where the effluent is coming from. So if you have questions, again, I think a lot of this, there were several questions submitted to EPA on this, because as you said, there are some questions that's not entirely clear. But I guess I would primarily break it down into, if it's coming from a municipality, you need to let them know. If it's coming from within your municipality and you trace it up and you can't find a source, then that would be the time to do some sampling.
Great, thanks, Josh.
I noticed John made a comment in the chat box, kind of relates to that, just making sure that you are, that you have your current, if you're neighboring MS4s, make sure you know who to contact within those communities should you encounter something, you know.
And I will say, at least for our co-permittees, if you find something and don't know who to contact, please contact us, or as I mentioned in our trustee meetings, you know, contact public health as well. They do specifically the HSTS, but they're certainly able to take a look. They've got staff in the field pretty regularly and can look at those IDDE concerns as well. So any of our co-permittees, you know, contact us or public health with issues like that, and we can certainly help and assist in those instances. Thanks, everybody. Another thing I put in here just very quickly for annual reporting purposes, just to remind everybody, annual reportings will be coming up here shortly. And some of the changes that they've added into that annual reporting, which will likely be reflected in the annual reporting as far as, you know, boxes to fill in or numbers to add. They're looking at, you know, kind of defining what those are, and you might see some of these changes to the annual reporting. But take a look at some of that list of what's going on there, you know, and some of the specified information that they really want.
Hey, Dave, this is Josh. Can you back up and can I just chime in here real quick?
Sure, you bet.
This part of the reporting for years has been a little bit tricky for us. And the reason being is that we have a lot of, ultimately the illicit discharges at the outfall of the MS4, but we have a lot of situations where we have sewage or partially treated sewage coming into the MS4 from aeration systems or other things like that. So in our case, as I'm sure it is in many communities, the entity that deals with that is public health. So one big aspect of this permit is the tracking of complaints and the resolution of those issues. So where we have turned to in this is for the annual reporting is having the public health department give us a list of all of the issues that they have resolved with aeration systems, as well as those that they have not been able to resolve yet. So in our instance, in our annual reporting for the county, some of those numbers are coming from our office, some of them are coming from public health. So I just wanted to bring that up because you can provide appendixes to the annual report to clarify what you have done, because the reporting is not always very clear and concise. So if you want to elaborate and just make sure that they know what has been done, then you can do an appendix and just explain it a little bit more.
Yeah, and I know I've always complained to EPA about, you know, well, we're also reporting things like construction site discharges in our illicit discharge. You know, that's the area where they want to know how many illicit discharges. Yet I think what they're trying to look at is more of the HSTS aspect instead of the overall pollution control aspect. So hopefully we'll get something like that. That's a lot of kind of the bookkeeping on our end when we have to do annual reporting. But the long and short of it is, if you see something other than stormwater entering your stormwater system, let somebody know, particularly us with our co-permittees. So do keep an eye for that. And that's what the IDDE program is really about and focused on, is getting that notification out there. I just wanted to throw this in there to show you that this is kind of EPA schedule. October 2020, you can see right there, director issues final permit. we'll see if that happens in the next few days. I would hope so, but I'm not counting on it till after perhaps the New Year's. We'll see what happens with that. Again, if you have any questions regarding that, you're welcome to check with me as well. Of course, I say that's all of this is pretty much my opinion, so, or my interpretation of the permit. If you really want to go to the source, call EPA, get a hold of these contacts if you really want to ask those questions and find out what's going on. I see we are almost to our time limit. One last poll question for you. Do you feel like you have trained staff and resources to meet these requirements? So hopefully, looking at what we've talked about, I hope it had you kind of look at your program and maybe consider some of these aspects. And we'd like to know if you feel like, oh, this is overwhelming too much, or do you feel comfortable with where you're at in your trained staff, and do you have those resources? Give you a few more seconds here. Looks like we're about at 85 and 15%. So I think maybe there is some question about, can we take care of this, or hopefully maybe you're just thinking of us and relying on us to do that, and we can get that trained staff for you. But looks like we've got about everybody. I think I'm showing 27 out of 28 voted. We'll go ahead and end that poll. And I think we are at 58 minutes. That's about all I have. Like I said, this has been recorded. Feel free to use this as a resource for other staff if you need. Just be aware that we can't provide those contact hours for that training. Brooke, was there any questions remaining that we need to address?
I don't really see any questions in there.
Okay.
I did see just a standard comment just saying that some people feel they have the staff is trained, but just not enough staff in some instances there.
So that kind of goes to that resources. Yeah, maybe they just don't have the resources available. Yeah. So again, like I say, if you have some of those issues, feel free to contact us. We are here to help. That's what our job is, basically, to help you guys with this. So feel free to contact us. With that, I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to reference our next upcoming webinar next Thursday.
Yep.
Be sure you do register for that. Again, like I say, that's how we're tracking your contact hours, and making sure you get your contact hour certificate for these trainings. So,
and to let people know, I will be, I'm working on the certificates in case you attended last week's MCM 1 and 2 webinar. I'll be working on getting those certificates out today, and then I'll start working on these and get the recording up. I did also share in the chat box there's an upcoming OSWA, Ohio EPA webinar on November 12th as well in the afternoon, and that's going to be dealing with the audits, the MS4 audits, and kind of talking about that, which may be helpful to a lot of you that are attending these as well.
Sounds great. With that, thank you all for participating. I hope to see you next week. And like I say, we'll pull it. We'll try it again next Thursday. Thanks, everybody.